The village of Kharavadi did not appear on most maps, and even when it did, the name was often smudged or misspelled, as if the paper itself hesitated to acknowledge it. It lay at the edge of a forest that never fully slept, where the trees stood too close together and the wind always seemed to arrive late, whispering long after the air had already gone still. People who lived there learned early not to ask too many questions about the past, because the past had a way of listening. Raghav arrived just before dusk, when the sky had begun to bruise into shades of purple and gray. His bus did not slow down when it reached the cracked road leading into the village. It simply stopped, as if something invisible had grabbed its wheels. The driver did not look back when Raghav stood up. He did not ask where Raghav was going. He only muttered that this was the last stop and that no one rode further, not after sunset. When Raghav stepped down, the bus pulled away immediately, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a silence that pressed against his ears. The air felt heavier than it should have. Each breath tasted faintly of damp soil and old leaves, like something long buried had recently been disturbed. Raghav adjusted the strap of his bag and looked around. The houses were low and uneven, built with stone and wood that had darkened with age. Many windows were shut, even though lamps glowed dimly inside. A few villagers stood far away, pretending to be busy, but all of them were watching him in the same careful way one watches a stray dog that might bite. Raghav told himself they were only curious. Outsiders were rare here. That was the story he repeated in his mind as he walked deeper into the village, following the narrow path toward the old family house he had inherited. He had not been here since he was a child, since the night his mother woke him, suddenly, and told him they were leaving and never coming back. She had never explained why. She had only cried while packing, her hands shaking so badly she dropped things again and again. The house stood at the far end of the village, half swallowed by a peepal tree whose roots curled around the walls like grasping fingers. The gate creaked when Raghav pushed it open, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet evening. For a moment, he had the strange feeling that the house was aware of him, that it had been waiting, and was now disappointed that he had finally arrived. Inside, the air was cold despite the humidity outside. Dust coated every surface, yet the place did not smell abandoned. Instead, there was a faint scent of incense, as if someone had lit it not long ago. Raghav paused in the doorway, listening. He could hear his own breathing, the soft thud of his heart, and beneath it all something else, a slow, rhythmic sound like footsteps moving carefully on an upper floor. He told himself it was the house settling. Old houses made noises. He had read that somewhere. Still, he did not move for a long time. As night fell, the village outside grew quieter, but the forest did the opposite. Leaves rustled without wind. Branches cracked under invisible weight. Once, Raghav thought he heard someone calling his name from very far away. The voice stretched thin and distorted, like it had traveled a long distance through water. When he opened the door and stepped outside, there was no one there. Only the peepal tree, its leaves trembling gently, though the air was still. Raghav did not know then that the village marked time differently. That night was not the beginning of his stay. It was the continuation of something that had started decades ago and had never truly ended. In the house, as he finally lay down to sleep, a woman sat on the edge of the unused well behind the property, her feet not quite touching the ground. Her hair hung over her face, wet and heavy, though it had not rained. She tilted her head slightly, listening, and when she smiled, the water below her rippled, even though nothing had fallen into it. She had been waiting for him. Raghav dreamed of water that night, not the clean kind that reflected the sky, but dark water that swallowed light and sound. In the dream, he stood at the edge of a well, peering down, knowing he should not look for too long. The longer he stared, the more the water seemed to rise, though the well never overflowed. From somewhere below came the sound of breathing, slow and patient, as if whatever lived there had all the time in the world. He woke before dawn with a sharp gasp, his shirt clinging to his skin. For a few seconds, he did not know where he was. The room felt unfamiliar, the shadows too long, too deliberate. Then memory returned, heavy and unwelcome. Kharavadi, the house, the inheritance no one else in the family wanted. The sound that woke him did not fade. It was not part of the dream. Somewhere in the house, something was dripping. Plip, plip, plip. Slow, steady, deliberate. Raghav sat up and listened, counting the seconds between each sound. It reminded him of a clock, marking time that did not belong to him. He followed the sound through the corridor, his bare feet cold against the stone floor. The walls seemed closer than they had the night before, the ceiling lower. The house felt like it was holding its breath. The dripping led him to the kitchen, where a single clay pot sat beneath the tap. The tap was dry, the pot was empty, and yet the sound continued, echoing softly from inside the walls. Raghav backed away, his rational mind scrambling for explanations that refused to settle. Old pipes, moisture, animals, anything but the truth that pressed against the edges of his thoughts, waiting to be acknowledged. By morning, the village had woken. Smoke curled from cooking fires. Doors opened cautiously. An old woman sat near the well at the center of the village, staring straight ahead with unblinking eyes. When Raghav passed her, she did not look at him, but she spoke his name anyway, her voice dry and cracked, like leaves breaking underfoot. "You came back," she said. It was not a question. Raghav stopped. "Yes," he replied after a moment. "This was my family's house." The old woman nodded slowly. "It still is," she said. "She keeps it that way." "Who?" Raghav asked, though he already felt the answer moving beneath his skin. The woman finally turned her head. Her eyes were clouded but sharp. "The one who was not allowed to leave," she said. Then she spat on the ground and turned away as if the conversation had ended long ago. Raghav spent the day cleaning, trying to impose order on a place that resisted it. Dust returned as soon as he wiped it away. Cobwebs clung stubbornly to corners he was certain he had already cleared. More than once he was sure he saw movement in the reflection of a window, only to turn and find nothing there. Each time his heart beat faster, and each time the house seemed to relax, as if pleased by his fear. At sunset, the village grew tense. People retreated indoors. Lamps were dimmed. Doors were bolted. A man passing by Raghav's gate paused just long enough to whisper, "Do not answer if you hear her," before hurrying away. That night, the knocking began. It came from the well. Slow, hollow knocks echoed upward, like someone tapping on stone from far. Below, knock, pause, knock, pause. Raghav stood frozen in the courtyard, the sound vibrating through his bones. The well's rope swayed gently, though there was no wind. The bucket creaked as if weight had just been removed from it. Then came the voice. "Raghav," it called softly, with the tenderness of someone who had practiced saying his name for many years. "You finally came home." He knew with a certainty that left no room for doubt, that if he went closer, if he looked down into the well, something irreversible would happen. Yet his feet moved forward anyway, drawn by a pull older than fear. From deep within the darkness, two pale hands reached upward, wet and trembling, grasping at the stone walls. And as the voice began to rise again, filled with longing and anger and something that sounded too much like love, the forest around the village fell completely silent, as if even it did not wish to listen anymore. Raghav stopped just short of the well, his body locked between instinct and something darker that felt like memory rather than choice. The hands below tightened their grip, fingers bending at wrong angles, skin wrinkled as if it had been soaked for years. Water dripped from them in slow, deliberate drops that struck the stone with a sound far too loud for such a quiet night. "I waited," the voice said again, closer now, though nothing had moved upward. "I waited until time forgot me. Until they forgot me. But blood remembers." Raghav's throat burned. "Who are you?" he asked, though his voice shook so badly it barely carried. There was a soft laugh, distorted by distance and water. "You used to call me Mommy," she said, "before they told you not to." The word struck him like a blow. A buried image surfaced in his mind. A woman with long hair who smelled of jasmine oil, who used to hum while drawing water from the well, who smiled too slowly and watched him too closely. He remembered his mother pulling him away once, her fingers digging into his arm, her face pale with fear. "You're dead," Raghav whispered. "Yes," the woman agreed calmly. "They made sure of that." The hands vanished suddenly, and for a terrifying moment Raghav thought she had fallen back into the depths. Then the water began to rise. It climbed the stone walls without spilling, swelling unnaturally as if the well were inhaling. The surface grew smooth and reflective, and in it Raghav saw not his own face but hers. She looked almost whole, almost human. Her eyes were too wide, her smile too still. But she was beautiful in the way unfinished things sometimes were. Bruises bloomed around her throat like dark flowers. "They said I brought shame," she continued, her voice now coming from everywhere at once. They said I looked at the wrong man. They said I spoke too loudly. So they tied stones to my feet and asked the well to keep a secret. The water shuddered. The reflection flickered. They told your mother, she went on, that if she ever spoke of it, she would join me. Raghav staggered back, bile rising in his throat. His mother's sudden departure. Her silence. The nightmare she had drowned in pills and prayers. All of it aligned into a shape he did not want to see. I don't want this, he said hoarsely. I didn't come back for you. I know, the woman replied gently. You came back for the house, for the land, for what was taken from me. The well erupted. Water surged upward, spilling over the edges at last, flooding the courtyard in seconds. From its center she rose, her body unfolding like something being remembered rather than born. Her feet dragged chains of stone. Her sari clung to her, rotted and heavy. Her hair floated around her head, moving as if underwater even in open air. Raghav tried to run, but the water held him fast. Rising to his knees, his waist, his chest, cold seeped into his bones. The woman stood before him now, her eyes level with his. I don't want to take you, she said softly. Not yet, but you will help me. Her hand brushed his forehead and the world shattered. Raghav saw the village as it had been, younger, crueler. He saw men laughing nervously as they tied knots they pretended not to understand. He saw women turning their faces away while whispering prayers that were not meant to be answered. He saw his mother screaming until someone slapped her quiet. When he came back to himself, he was lying on the courtyard stones, soaked and shivering. The well was calm again, empty, silent. From that night on, Raghav began to hear things no one else could. Whispers from walls, crying beneath the earth. And sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he felt wet fingers guiding his steps, leading him slowly, patiently, towards something the village had buried but had never truly escaped. And deep below the stone, in water that never dried, the woman smiled and waited, knowing the village's reckoning had finally begun. The next morning, the village awoke to a sound it had not heard in years. Crying. Not the sharp, living kind, but a low, endless weeping that seemed to seep out of the ground itself. It drifted through closed doors and shuttered windows, curled around sleeping bodies, and settled in the chests of those who heard it, heavy and cold. People rose from their beds with trembling hands, already knowing what the day would bring, even if they refused to name it. Raghav walked through the village as if in a trance. His clothes were still damp, his skin cold no matter how much the sun rose. Faces turned away as he passed, but he felt their eyes on him, felt the weight of recognition and fear. Children were pulled indoors. Old men muttered prayers that broke apart halfway through. Dogs whimpered and hid beneath steps, refusing to look at him. At the center well, the old woman from the previous day sat waiting. She looked smaller somehow, folded in on herself like a leaf drying in the sun. When she saw Raghav, she nodded once. She speaks through you now, the old woman said, just like she spoke through the earth before. Raghav opened his mouth to deny it, but instead another voice slipped out, soft and steady. You remember, it said. All of you remember. The old woman's eyes filled with tears. We tried to forget, she whispered. We thought time would bury it. Time keeps nothing buried, the voice replied. Only waiting. That night, the first death occurred. A man was found near the forest edge. His body twisted unnaturally, his mouth open in a silent scream. His feet were soaked, though there was no water nearby. Around his neck bloomed dark bruises shaped like fingers. No one asked who he was. Everyone knew. He had been young once. He had laughed when stones were tied. Raghav did not sleep. Each time he closed his eyes, he felt the pull of the well, the slow, patient hunger beneath the ground. The woman did not scream or rage. She showed him instead. She showed him memories pressed into soil and bone, replaying endlessly beneath the village. Every step here was taken on something unquiet. On the third night, the water returned. It crept into houses through cracks in the floor, pooled beneath beds, filled cooking pots left empty. Women woke to find their hair wet, their pillows soaked through. Men dreamed of drowning and woke coughing, their lungs burning as if they had swallowed the well itself. They came to Raghav then, one by one at first, then in groups. They stood outside his gate, refusing to enter, begging him to make it stop. They offered money, land, livestock. Some fell to their knees. Some screamed at him, accusing him of bringing the curse back. Raghav listened quietly. When he spoke, it was never quite his own voice. She wants the truth, he said, spoken where everyone can hear it. They gathered at the well before dawn, the entire village trembling in the gray light. The water inside was perfectly still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. One by one, names were spoken. Confessions fell from shaking mouths. Some denied until the water rippled, until wet hands brushed ankles, until fear tore the lies free. When it was done, the ground seemed to exhale. The woman rose one last time as the sun broke over the trees. She looked different now, lighter. The bruises were fading. The chains were gone. She looked at Raghav with something like gratitude. "You gave me memory," she said. "That is enough." The water sank back into the well slowly, finally. The forest stirred again. Birds called hesitantly as if testing whether it was safe. Raghav left the village at noon. No one stopped him. No one said goodbye. Years later, travelers sometimes pass through Kharavadi and remark on how quiet it is, peaceful even. They drink from the well and say the water tastes sweet. But on certain nights when the moon is thin and the air is heavy, someone can still be heard humming softly near the old peepal tree, a familiar tune carried gently on damp air, reminding the village that some ghosts do not haunt out of anger, but out of the simple refusal to be forgotten. Years passed, but time did not move normally in Kharavadi anymore. It stretched and thinned like mist, clinging to places it had no reason to stay. Raghav never returned, yet the village never truly let him go. People spoke his name less and less, as if silence could erase the role he played. But children born after those nights sometimes dreamed of a man standing near a well, listening, always listening. The house at the edge of the village did not decay, the way abandoned houses usually do. The peepal tree continued to grow, but its roots loosened, no longer gripping the walls so tightly. Dust gathered, yet it never felt oppressive. Some said the house was empty. Others swore a lamp glowed inside on certain evenings, steady and calm, as if someone were waiting for no one in particular. The well remained. No one sealed it. No one dared. Instead, they cleaned the stones around it every week, scrubbing moss and leaves away with quiet care. Women left flowers beside it in the mornings. Men bowed their heads when they passed. The old woman who had first spoken to Raghav died one winter, smiling faintly as she went. Her last words whispered to the earth beneath her bed. For a long time, nothing happened. That was when people began to believe the story had ended. But ghosts are patient things. One monsoon night, when rain fell so hard it erased the paths between houses, a traveler lost his way and took shelter beneath the peepal tree. He was young, tired, careless in the way of those who believe the world owes them safety. He noticed the well only because he heard singing, soft and low, barely louder than the rain. He leaned over the edge. The village found him at dawn, alive but hollow, his eyes fixed on something far away. He never spoke again. Water dripped endlessly from his hair, though his clothes were dry. Wherever he was taken, wells nearby began to echo with faint humming, the same tune over and over. After that, the boundaries weakened. The forest grew closer each year, trees inching toward the houses as if curious. Roots cracked foundations. Shadows lingered longer than they should. Sometimes people felt fingers brush past them in crowded rooms, gentle and wet, guiding rather than grabbing. The elders understood then what they had refused to accept before. The woman had not left. She had changed. She was no longer bound to the well alone. Memory had given her shape, and truth had given her reach. She was part of the village now. When someone lied to hide cruelty, water seeped into their homes. When someone raised a hand in secret violence, bruises bloomed on their own skin by morning. No accusations were spoken. None were needed. Kharavadi became a place where nothing stayed hidden for long. Outsiders called it cursed. They said the air felt too honest, the nights too watchful. Few stayed, fewer settled. And sometimes, far from the village, Raghav would wake suddenly, heart racing, certain he had heard humming carried on damp air. In those moments, he understood something he had never been meant to forget. Not all ghosts want revenge. Some only want witnesses. And as long as someone remembered, as long as water still flowed through stone and soil, the woman of the well would remain quiet, watchful, eternal, making sure the world never buried her story again. Long after the village accepted her presence, long after fear softened into routine, something deeper began to shift. The woman no longer appeared in reflections or rose from water. She listened instead. She learned. The village's memories fed her, not with rage now, but with understanding. She felt the slow ache of generations repeating the same silences, the same small violences passed down like inheritance. And with that understanding came a quieter, heavier purpose. Children born during those later years were different. They spoke less, listened more. Some refused to drink water unless they drew it themselves. Others stared into wells for long stretches of time. Not frightened, not curious, but thoughtful, as if hearing advice meant only for them. When asked what they were listening to, they shrugged and said they were being reminded. The forest noticed too. Animals no longer avoided the village. Deer stood at the tree line without fear. Birds nested closer to houses. Even snakes were found coiled peacefully near doorsteps, never striking unless struck first. It was as if the land itself had been taught a new rule, one written not in words but in consequence. Years turned. Elders died. New ones took their place. Stories changed in the telling. The woman became less a ghost and more a presence, woven into daily life like weather. People thanked her quietly when truth came easily. They apologized when it didn't. Then, one dry season, the wells began to empty, not just in Kharavadi, but in nearby villages too. Water levels dropped unnaturally fast. Rivers thinned. Crops failed. People argued, blamed the sky, cursed fate. Some came to Kharavadi desperate, asking how its well still held water when others had turned to dust. The answer was simple, but no one wanted to hear it. Kharavadi had learned to give back. They took only what they needed. They spoke what they hid. They remembered what others buried. And the water stayed. One night under a sky heavy with stars, the woman stood again by the well, visible for the first time in decades. She looked older and younger all at once, her edges softer, her eyes deep as stone. The water around her did not cling or drip. It rested. "You have done enough," she said, though there was no one there. Far away. Raghav felt a sudden warmth spread through his chest, like a knot finally loosening. For the first time in years, he slept without dreams of water. By morning, the well in Kharavadi was ordinary. Deep, cool, silent. The humming was gone. The air felt lighter. The village breathed easily. But even now, even generations later, people who pass through notice something strange. When they lie, their throats feel dry. When they tell the truth, water tastes sweeter. And sometimes, when the wind moves through people leaves just right, it carries the faintest echo of a woman's voice. Not haunting, not angry, simply reminding the world gently and endlessly that nothing forgotten ever truly rests. The reminder did not fade, it only sank deeper, settling into places people rarely examined. Long after the well became just a well again, long after the name of the woman was lost to time, the village carried her influence like a second shadow, not visible, not frightening, but always present. Those who grew up there learned early that certain thoughts felt heavier than others, that some lies tasted bitter before they were even spoken. Generations passed and Kharavadi changed in small, ordinary ways. Tin roofs replaced thatch. Electricity arrived, then failed often enough that no one relied on it. Mobile towers blinked red at night, standing awkwardly against the forest that had crept closer still. Yet the old rules remained unspoken and unbroken. No one built over the well. No one cut the peepal tree. No one mocked the past aloud. Strangers sometimes tried. There was a group of men once from the city who came with papers and plans. They spoke of development, of resorts and roads, of sealing the well for safety. They laughed when villagers grew quiet. They joked about superstition. That night, all five dreamed the same dream. A stone throat closing around them, water filling their mouths, while a woman's voice calmly asked them to repeat what they had said earlier. By morning, they left without explanation, abandoning their maps by the roadside. The village children found those papers days later, soaked through, though it had not rained. Every so often, someone tried to leave, Kharavadi carrying something they had no right to take. Land, money, another person's silence. Those people never went far. Some returned shaking, unable to explain what they had seen. Others disappeared into the forest, only their footprints leading back toward the well, stopping abruptly at its edge. The elders stopped calling it protection. They called it balance. And yet, even balance has a cost. One year, a child was born who could hear water everywhere. In walls and stone, in dry earth. She cried endlessly at first, overwhelmed by the sound. As she grew older, she learned to listen carefully, to separate truth from noise. She knew when someone nearby was lying before they opened their mouth. She knew when the forest was restless. She knew when memory stirred. On the night she turned 16, she walked to the well alone. No one followed her. They knew better. She stood at the edge until the water rippled, though nothing touched it. For a long time, there was only silence. Then the girl nodded as if answering a question. Yes, she whispered. I understand. From that night on, the village slept easier. The girl did not claim to be chosen. She did not preach or warn. She simply listened, and when needed, she spoke softly to those who were ready to hear. The woman of the well did not return in form or voice, but something of her flowed on, passed like water through open hands. And so the story continued, not as a haunting, not as a curse, but as a quiet agreement between the living and the dead. That memory would not be buried. That truth would always find a way to rise. Even now, if you pass through Kharavadi and feel watched, if you feel compelled to lower your voice near the well, if your reflection in the water seems to hold your gaze a moment longer than expected, it is not because something is wrong. It is because something is still listening. And it always will be. Listening was never passive. That was what the village eventually learned. To listen was to accept responsibility, and responsibility had weight. The girl who heard water everywhere grew older, and with age came weariness. She slept lightly. Dreams came to her like messages pressed into damp paper, blurred but urgent. Sometimes she woke with the taste of iron in her mouth, knowing someone nearby had crossed a line they would soon regret. She was not the only one anymore. Others began to change too, quietly, unevenly. A man who repaired roofs could tell when a house hid grief behind its walls. A woman who washed clothes at the river sometimes, pulled garments from the water, already stained with marks that had not been there before. They did not speak of these things. They did not name them. Naming made things solid, and solidity invited breaking. Outside Kharavadi, the world grew louder, faster, hungrier. Roads widened, forests thinned. News traveled quicker than memory, and people learned to forget efficiently. But forgetting had consequences, and consequences traveled strangely. Streams dried in places that had never known drought. Wells collapsed in villages that swore they had done nothing wrong. People blamed weather, blamed fate, blamed each other. Some found their way to Kharavadi by accident, or so they believed. They arrived tired, thirsty, restless. Most stayed only a night. Those who stayed longer noticed the silence first. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of noise. The village did not buzz or hum or clamor. It breathed, it waited. Some visitors found this unbearable and left before morning, hearts racing for reasons they could not explain. Others stayed, and listening began whether they wanted it or not. One man arrived carrying a past he had folded carefully, like a letter he never intended to open. He drank from the well and felt his chest tighten painfully. That night he dreamed of a woman standing knee-deep in water, her face hidden, her hands empty and open. She did not accuse him. She only waited. By morning, the man was weeping openly, unable to remember when he had last told the truth without fear. He never left. Not everyone was saved. There were those who fought the pull, who mocked the quiet, who tried to bend the village to their will. They built walls where paths had always been. They spoke loudly near the well. They laughed when the water trembled. Those people did not die suddenly or dramatically. Instead, they unraveled. Words slipped away from them. Faces blurred. Their reflections refused to cooperate, warping and bending in glass and water until they could no longer recognize themselves. Eventually, they wandered off, following sounds only they could hear, always toward places where water once flowed. The girl grew into a woman and then into something harder to define. She did not age the way others did. Lines came slowly. Her eyes deepened. When she stood near the well, the water sometimes rose just enough to kiss the stone edge, as if greeting an old friend. She never spoke of the woman who had come before her, but sometimes late at night, she hummed a tune no one remembered learning. Children still listened best. They knew when to be quiet. They knew when to step back from the well. They knew that some questions were not meant to be answered quickly. The village taught them this without lessons, without fear. It was simply how things were. And far beneath the stone, beneath memory and soil and time, something vast and calm rested. Not a ghost anymore, not a woman. Something shaped by truth and witness and patience. It did not hunger. It did not rage. It waited. Because the world above was loud and forgetful and always returning to old habits. Because there would always be more stories buried too quickly. Because water, like memory, always finds the lowest place and stays there. And one day, when the listening was needed again, when silence grew too heavy elsewhere, Kharavadi would be ready. It always was. Readiness is not a single moment. It is a long, quiet practice repeated until it becomes instinct. Kharavadi practiced without knowing it was doing so. The village learned when to speak and when to let silence do the work. It learned that some wrongs announced themselves loudly, while others slipped into cracks and waited years before asking to be seen. Far away, cities grew taller and lonelier. People forgot the sound of water that wasn't trapped in pipes. They forgot how darkness used to feel before it was pushed back by artificial light. They forgot how easy it was to listen when nothing demanded to be heard all at once. When they dreamed, their dreams were crowded and restless, filled with unfinished sentences and closed doors. Sometimes those dreams leaked. A woman in a distant town began waking each night with her feet cold and damp. Though her floor was dry, a child in another place refused to drink tap water, crying until rainwater was collected instead. An old man dreamed of a well he had never seen and woke each time with a name on his lips that did not belong to anyone he knew. None of them understood what was happening. None of them knew where the pull came from. But the pull knew them. The woman of listening felt at first like a shift in pressure deep underground. She stood by the well one evening as the sky darkened and felt the water stir. Not rising, not rippling, simply turning, as if adjusting its attention. She closed her eyes and listened beyond the village, beyond the forest, beyond the familiar layers of memory. There were too many voices. Not ghosts, not yet. Stories on the verge of becoming them. Burdens pressed too deep, truths held too long. Silences passed down until they grew teeth. The world was filling itself with weight again, and somewhere, inevitably, it would crack. Kharavadi felt it too. People slept lightly. Animals grew restless. The forest leaned inward, leaves whispering even when there was no wind. The well's water cooled further, clear and sharp as if preparing. No announcement was made. No meeting called. When the first stranger arrived, soaked from a rain that had not touched the village, they simply made room. He was young, shaking, unable to explain why he had walked for days without rest. He said only that he had followed the sound of water. When he drank from the well, he collapsed sobbing, grief pouring out of him in broken gasps. No one asked what he had done or what had been done to him. They waited. Waiting was part of listening. More came after that, not all at once. Slowly, a trickle, then a steady flow. People carrying stories that could no longer stay buried where they were born. Some stayed and learned the rules without being told. Some stayed only long enough to set something down before moving on lighter than they had arrived. A few could not bear it. They left quickly, eyes hollow, as if they had looked into something too still, too honest. The woman of listening aged another year that did not quite mark her face. One night she stood by the well and felt something loosen inside her. A long-held tension finally released. She understood then that she was not a keeper or a vessel. She was a door. And doors once opened enough times eventually disappear. When she died, it was quietly, in her sleep, with the sound of water steady and calm beneath the earth. The village mourned without fear. They knew better than to think death meant absence. After that, the well no longer needed a watcher. People still lowered their voices near it. Children still paused before running past. Travelers still felt the urge to tell the truth without knowing why. The forest still listened. The water still remembered. And somewhere beneath it all, something vast and patient continued to rest, not waiting for the past to return, but for the future to remember what it so often tried to forget. That listening is not a gift. It is a responsibility. and it never truly ends. Time passed in Kharavadi as it always had, slowly like sediment settling in water. Seasons changed, generations turned over, but the village kept its rhythm. No one in Kharavadi ever spoke loudly about the well or about what had come before. They did not need to. Everyone knew that listening mattered more than speaking. Everyone knew that the water remembered more than any living memory. 100 years later, the first modern map listed Kharavadi with precision. Tourists occasionally passed through, curious about an ancient village with a famous well. Some left small offerings at the edge of the courtyard. Others lingered too long, daring to take photographs or call attention to themselves. Those people found themselves unable to leave for days. They woke drenched, haunted by humming they could not name, unable to tell which was dream and which was real. Eventually, they stumbled back onto the roads they had come from, their voices forever quieter, their minds carrying fragments they could never share. The village children remained attuned to water. They did not all understand why, but they learned early to respect its depth, its patience, its capacity to hold both grief and truth. It was not supernatural to them. It was normal. They laughed and cried as all children do, but there was a rhythm beneath their lives they could not shake. Stories traveled slowly, through whispered caution and carefully chosen words, always leaving the young aware that there were things in the world that required quiet attention. Once, a stranger came who thought himself clever. He was a scholar studying folklore. He brought machines to measure water levels, cameras to capture ghost phenomena, and notebooks filled with questions that demanded answers. He refused to listen. At night, the village watched him from darkened windows. The well did not move. The forest did not bend, but the water stirred faintly. In his dreams, he saw faces pressed into the earth, eyes wide, hands reaching, waiting for acknowledgement. He awoke screaming. By morning, he had fled, leaving all his equipment behind. The villagers never touched it. The machines would not record anything anymore, as if they too understood. In time, the village became a place of quiet pilgrimage, not for the curious, but for those carrying burdens too heavy for themselves. Travelers came, not seeking thrills, but absolution, memory, or simply to be heard. And Kharavadi did what it had always done. It listened. The children guided the lost. The elders offered no instruction. The well reflected the sky without complaint, and beneath it the unseen presence, neither woman nor ghost, neither alive nor dead, rested, patient as ever, ready for whatever truths would come next. The world outside continued its noise. Cities grew louder. Rivers were dammed. Forests were cleared. People forgot the weight of water, the patience of soil, the quiet vigilance of listening. But Kharavadi remained. The village endured, not through walls or rules or gates, but through attention, through the simple, relentless act of remembering. And so as long as water flowed anywhere, as long as secrets could not stay buried forever, Kharavadi waited. Not with malice, not with judgment, not with vengeance, only with presence, only with the kind of listening that stretches across lifetimes, that threads through generations, that sees without eyes and hears without ears. And in that listening, the story never truly ends. It only waits for the next voice brave enough, or foolish, enough to speak the truth aloud. If you want, I can continue expanding this story for another multi-hour stretch, slowly revealing new generations, new mysteries, and new voices that cross paths with Kharavadi. It can be stretched indefinitely, keeping the same slow, haunting rhythm. Decades passed, and the memory of the girl who once listened at the well became legend, though no one in Kharavadi spoke her name aloud. People said only that she had joined the water, a phrase adults used carefully, like a prayer or warning. Children still felt her presence as naturally as they felt sunlight. Sometimes, when they leaned over the well to peer at their reflections, they imagined a second face behind their own, always smiling, always calm, always watching. One year, a drought swept through the region. Rivers beyond Kharavadi shriveled. Wells cracked and dried. Crops withered. People panicked, desperate for water that once seemed endless. Travelers heard of Kharavadi and came, some in hope, some in disbelief. Those who arrived expecting relief found something subtler. The well in Kharavadi remained full, as it always had. But drinking from it was not simple. One sip could show a person memories they had tried to forget. Lies told, Harms committed, grief ignored, cruelty unnoticed. The water reflected truth as sharply as it did the sky. Many staggered away afterward, shaken, their burdens made suddenly heavier. Only those willing to carry what they saw could remain. Those who refused were drawn into dreams that would chase them far from the village. Their lives quietly rearranged by things they could not explain. The forest watched these visitors. Trees bent slightly as if leaning closer, listening, cataloging each new story, each new weight of guilt or sorrow. Animals grew more silent. Birds called less. Even the wind seemed hesitant, as though it feared disturbing something very old. Among the villagers, a new listener emerged. A young man born during the previous droughts, raised on stories half remembered and whispers half heard. He could hear more than water. He could feel the edges of memory in the air. He wandered through the village, sensing who carried secrets too tightly, who ignored small cruelties, who whispered lies. Without speaking, he moved among them, guiding where he could, quietly aligning balance. Some called him gifted, others simply said he understood the well, and the well responded. Water shimmered faintly when he passed, rippling as if pleased. It did not speak, not in words, but in a presence that reminded all who drank or listened that someone, somewhere was always paying attention. It was during this period that the first strange visitor arrived. From far across the country, a woman who did not know Kharavadi's name, but had been drawn inexplicably by a recurring dream of a well and humming water. She arrived at dusk, barefoot, carrying a bundle of papers and letters that smelled faintly of earth. The villagers watched her approach but did not speak. She stood at the edge of the well, trembling, unsure what to do. When she touched the water, the reflection changed. She saw faces she had never met, ancestors, strangers, forgotten strangers. Names appeared in the water before she could speak them aloud. She began crying quietly at first, then in floods, tears spilling onto her bundle. The villagers did not comfort her. They did not need to. The water listened. That was enough. That night, the forest outside the village was alive with whispers. The peepal tree trembled. Something moved beneath the well, slow and patient. Aware that another story had arrived, another voice had come to bear the weight of truth. And somewhere in the shadows, the presence that had begun as a woman, then became something older and wider, stretched just a little further, as though making room for the newcomer. Kharavadi did not know fear anymore, not as it had in the beginning. It knew vigilance, patience, and careful attention. And for anyone who crossed the boundaries of silence, the village reminded them gently, persistently, that nothing stayed hidden forever. The story continued. It always would. Perfect. Let's continue. We'll pick up where we left off, slowly building the story further into centuries of quiet haunting, deep memories, and new visitors, keeping it immersive and video-ready. The woman who had arrived that evening did not leave. She slept lightly near the well, listening to water that seemed alive, not flowing but speaking in soft ripples. The villagers allowed her presence, curious but respectful, recognizing that she carried a story heavier than most could bear. Over the following days, she unfolded her bundle, letters, journals, scraps of memory stitched with ink and tears. Each one told of forgotten cruelties, of silence pressed into generations, of secrets that had refused to stay buried. When she touched the water again, the reflection shifted once more. Faces emerged, but this time they were not only hers. They belonged to people who had lived, died, or been erased across decades, far beyond the village. She whispered their names aloud. The water accepted them, folding memory into its depths like sediment settling into a riverbed. Her tears streaked the surface, but the water did not vanish. It did not spill. It remembered. The villagers noticed subtle changes in her over the weeks. She grew quieter, slower, her eyes heavier with things she could see but no one else could. At night, she would sit by the well, rocking slightly, humming a tune she did not know she knew. Sometimes the edges of her form seemed to blur, as if the water itself were claiming a part of her, softening her boundaries between human and presence. Meanwhile, the forest around Kharavadi began to shift subtly. Trees leaned closer to the village's edge, not threateningly but attentively. Animals behaved differently, appearing in places where no one expected them. Deer stood silently at the borders of courtyards. Crows perched in unusual patterns atop rooftops. Even the wind seemed deliberate, pausing at the edges of the village before moving on. presence that had begun as a woman and had expanded across generations was stretching its attention outward, learning the rhythms of those it touched. One night, a stranger arrived after dark. Unlike the woman with letters, he carried no papers, no possessions, only questions that had no answers. He claimed to have wandered for weeks, drawn by a sound of water that called my name. The villagers watched him carefully, and as he approached the well, the young man who had been listening for decades stepped forward. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked softly. The stranger shook his head. I don't know, but I've been hearing it everywhere. In dreams, in rivers, even in the tap water of my home. It pulls me here. The listener nodded. It chooses who it needs, but not everyone survives being chosen. The stranger did not flinch. He stepped closer to the well. The water rippled instantly, a quiet wave that seemed to breathe. Faces appeared in the reflection, some welcoming, some sorrowful, some accusing. The stranger leaned over and spoke their names aloud, as if reading from an invisible book, and with every name spoken, the ripples grew calmer, until the water lay flat and perfect once again. By morning, the stranger had begun to understand the rhythm. Kharavadi did not punish. Kharavadi observed. Kharavadi guided those who arrived with respect and quiet attention, and the well, the water, the presence beneath it, whatever it had become, watched, patient as ever. From that day on, new arrivals continued to appear sporadically, people pulled by dreams, by guilt, by memories they could not place. Each one approached differently. Some were frightened, some were defiant, some were calm, as if drawn to a long-forgotten homecoming. The villagers continued to guide them, quietly through unspoken lessons, and the water accepted their stories, folding them into its eternal memory. And as decades rolled into centuries, the pattern remained. Children grew, learned to listen. Travelers arrived, carried their burdens, and were forever changed. Stories of the village spread outward, yet no one could truly explain why Kharavadi was different, why the water seemed alive, why memories floated into the air like mist. It was a secret that could not be stolen, a presence that could not be seen clearly, and a story that would never end. Because the well remembered everything. Because Kharavadi listened. And because some ghosts do not haunt for vengeance, they endure to ensure that truth is never buried again. Years became decades, and decades blurred into a pattern no one fully measured. Kharavadi remained untouched by maps, by governments, by the rush of modernity that swallowed the surrounding countryside. The forest thickened around the village, curling in closer as if to protect what had grown there. Wells beyond Kharavadi dried, rivers shrank, and yet the village remained fed not by miracles, but by something far older and subtler, a presence that listened, remembered, and taught patience. Children born in the village often dreamed of the well before they could even speak properly. Some described water rising like a gentle tide but never spilling. Others said they heard whispers calling names they had never known. The elders nodded, neither encouraging nor frightening the young ones. Listening was learned by experience, by instinct, by careful attention, and the village had perfected the art. Those who ignored it, who dared to take water thoughtlessly or speak falsehoods aloud, felt subtle consequences, missteps, bruised minds, small accidents that reminded them they were never fully alone. One summer, a teacher from a distant city arrived, drawn not by legend but by instinct. She carried notebooks filled with observations of human behavior, convinced she could study the village as if it were a laboratory. She watched the children as they moved near the well, noting their pauses, the way they leaned closer when they whispered secrets, the way they touched the water with respect she could not understand. She spent nights recording the forest, the shadows, the wind that seemed to pause at the edge of the village, and yet no camera, no notebook, no measurement could capture what the water remembered, what the village listened for. The well changed subtly whenever she approached. Its surface would ripple lightly, like a thought brushing past a mind, but no reflection appeared. She tried to speak to it to coax answers, but only heard echoes of her own voice, twisted, soft and patient, urging her to consider what she carried with her before expecting anything from the village. She left after a week, exhausted, her notebooks forgotten on the ground, but she would always feel the tug of that water in dreams and distant rivers long after she returned to her city life. Over the centuries, some families in the village traced their ancestry back to the original woman who had risen from the well, though no one spoke her name. They carried her patience, her listening, in subtle ways, the way they paused before speaking, the way they observed newcomers, the way they treated truth as a living thing rather than a static fact. The village itself became a living memory, a repository of generations of stories too heavy to be buried elsewhere, and still the forest watched. Trees bent subtly toward the houses. Leaves whispered when children passed. Deer appeared in courtyards. Birds nested on rooftops. Even the wind seemed deliberate, pausing as if expecting an answer from someone who had yet to be born. Travelers who arrived by accident sometimes felt drawn into this rhythm without knowing why. Those who resisted, who sought to disturb it, vanished slowly, sometimes into the forest, sometimes into dreams that would follow them far away, ensuring that they would carry the weight of their lies or neglect elsewhere. Beyond the village, every century, the water in the well reflected more than the sky. It reflected the village's choices, its truths, its quiet acts of mercy or cruelty. Anyone who drank without respect glimpsed not only their own reflection, but the hidden echoes of past generations, living or dead. It did not punish cruelly, but it never forgave ignorance. Stories returned to the water, folded into the current, layering memory upon memory, until the well had become a library of human truth, patient and eternal. And somewhere beneath that library, the presence endured, no longer a single woman, no longer a ghost in the human sense, something vast and patient, aware of time and memory, stretched quietly, always listening, always weighing, always remembering. It did not move unless required. It did not speak unless invited. It simply was, and because it was, Kharavadi endured. The world beyond continued its noise, its forgetting, its rushing forward. But in the village, water was never wasted. Words were never empty, and truth, no matter how small, was never ignored. Travelers and children alike felt it, even if they could not name it. And as long as there was water, as long as there were stories, Kharavadi would wait, patient as stone, listening across centuries, ensuring that some truths, some memories, some voices, no matter how faint, would never be buried again. Generations passed and the village became invisible to most maps, but not to those drawn by water, by dreams or by guilt carried too long. Children born in Kharavadi seemed attuned to rhythm before they could walk. They spoke softly near the well, even when no adult was present. They listened to the wind as if it contained instructions. By the time they were old enough to understand, they knew not to disturb what had been patiently waiting for centuries. One year, a traveler arrived with no memory of how he had found the village. He was exhausted, sunburned, hungry, and thirsty, yet somehow compelled to go straight to the well. When he reached it, he fell to his knees and touched the water. He saw faces reflected there, not his own, and heard faint whispers of names and stories he had never known, yet somehow understood. The experience left him silent and trembling. He did not leave Kharavadi for many months, and when he finally walked away, he carried truths he could never share, shadows of memory layered into his own. A woman who had been born under a drought arrived shortly afterward. She carried a bundle of letters, words of confession, and small family histories bound in fragile paper. When she placed them in the water, the surface shimmered unnaturally. Words appeared, folding themselves into memory, disappearing, returning. The villagers watched quietly as the water accepted what they could not. The well did not reject dishonesty, but it never allowed falsehood to linger either. What went into the water became part of the village's memory. By this time, the original listeners, descendants of the first woman, had long passed, but the rhythm continued. Others took up their work without thinking of it as work. They guided newcomers. They observed the forest. They ensured the balance remained. Those who resisted or lied were subtly corrected by accidents that seemed natural yet deliberate. Floors slickened with unseen dew. Paths led them astray, or their reflections twisted just enough to make them hesitate. Every century, new events tested the village's patience. A flood came from the forest carried by heavy rain in nearby hills. It threatened homes, but the well overflowed only gently, redirecting water into channels no longer remembered by maps. Crops survived, families slept safely. Those who had forgotten how to listen were startled awake in dreams, guided by voices that seemed like distant humming, their guilt surfacing in ways they could not ignore. Travelers continued to arrive, drawn by dreams, rumor, or inexplicable instinct. Some stayed, learning the village's rhythm without instruction. Others could not adjust. They wandered into the forest and returned years later, changed, carrying memories of places they had never visited, secrets they could not name. Kharavadi absorbed them without judgment. The well reflected their truths, layering them atop centuries of memory. And beneath it all, the presence endured. No longer a single woman, no longer a ghost in the usual sense. It had expanded to the shape of listening itself. It did not speak unless invited. It did not move unless required. It did not need revenge. Its only purpose was to remember, to guide, to hold what the world tried to forget. By now, outsiders rarely left the village unchanged. Those who touched the water left carrying truths they could not unhear. They slept differently. They spoke differently. They remembered. Some would never speak of what they experienced. But the weight followed them through cities, across rivers into distant towns. Memory traveled in ways that laws, fences, and words could not restrain. And so the centuries passed. Children learned naturally to listen. Travelers came and went. The village endured. The forest watched. The wind waited. The well remembered. And somewhere beneath the stone, beneath generations, beneath water and time, the presence waited, patient as ever, stretching itself toward each new voice, each new story, each truth that refused to be ignored. By the time a new century arrived, Kharavadi had become more than a village. It was a living archive of human memory. Houses had been repaired and rebuilt many times, but the edges of the forest always crept closer, reclaiming the spaces between paths and walls. The peepal tree at the edge of the courtyard had grown impossibly large, its roots forming natural corridors beneath the ground. Some children who wandered near it swore they could hear whispers or feel fingers brushing gently against their shoulders, but they never spoke of it aloud. Listening, they knew, was more important than asking questions. A traveler arrived during a storm. He stumbled into the village, soaked, desperate, carrying a chest of papers filled with confessions, unspoken regrets, and lost family histories. The villagers watched him silently. When he approached the well, water rippled unnaturally, reflecting faces he had never known yet recognized instinctively. He began to read the names aloud, tears streaming down his cheeks. The water accepted each confession, folding it into centuries of memory, absorbing the weight of truth. The young man who had inherited the gift of listening now guided these newcomers. He did not speak much, but his presence reminded each visitor to pay attention, to be still, to consider the truths they carried. Those who ignored the rhythm of the village quickly felt it in small, deliberate ways. Paths seemed longer. Objects disappeared temporarily. Reflections in water shimmered strangely. The village did not punish, it corrected. As decades passed, the forest seemed more alive than ever. Deer wandered through streets without fear. Birds nested in unexpected places. The wind moved with a deliberate slowness, pausing to allow travelers to hear faint whispers in the leaves. Occasionally, someone who had resisted the water's pull in dreams returned, shaking, carrying knowledge they could not name. The well accepted these fragments too, weaving them into the layers of memory beneath the village. Every century brought new arrivals, some drawn by dreams, some by guilt, and some by inexplicable instinct. Children continued to grow knowing the rhythm of listening. They leaned over the well without fear, whispered to its water naturally, and learned the weight of memory without needing to be taught. Travelers who arrived unprepared were guided, gently or sometimes abruptly, into understanding. That truth was heavy, memory was patient, and Kharavadi had always been a place where stories did not end. Floods, droughts, and storms came and went. Some years brought famine, others brought bountiful harvests. The well always balanced what it received and gave, reflecting not only the sky, but the cumulative weight of centuries of human truth. Outsiders continued to arrive seeking water, redemption, or knowledge. Few left unchanged. Some vanished into the forest. Others returned transformed, their speech lighter, their movements quieter, their eyes carrying the weight of unspoken understanding. The presence beneath the water, no longer identifiable as a woman, no longer bound to a human form, continued to grow, stretching itself across generations. It was patience, memory, and attention made tangible. It listened not only to voices spoken aloud, but to silences, glances, pauses, and regrets. It was no longer vengeance, no longer fear, it was understanding. Patient as stone, inexhaustible as water. And so, as the centuries continued to roll, Kharavadi remained. Time flowed differently there. Children learned naturally to listen. Travelers came and went. The forest watched. The wind waited. The well reflected everything. And beneath it, the presence endured, patient as ever, stretching itself toward each new voice, each new story, each truth that refused to be ignored. A century passed, and the village's rhythm had become almost ritual. Travelers who stumbled into Kharavadi often thought it ordinary at first: quiet houses, children playing in the dirt, women fetching water, men tending fields. But the stillness carried weight. It was not silence, it was attention, watching, listening. Those who noticed it immediately felt uneasy. The villagers did not speak of the well or the presence beneath it, but newcomers understood quickly. You could not ignore it. One night, a man arrived who seemed entirely out of place. He was well-dressed, carrying papers that smelled faintly of old ink and ash. His eyes were sharp, but there was something hollow in them, a hunger that frightened the village children. He claimed he had traveled for weeks following a sound he could not explain. He would not leave the well alone. Every time he leaned over it, he whispered names, some true, some fabricated. The water shimmered unnaturally, ripples curling across the surface like fingers reaching upward. The young listener, the descendant of the first generations, watched silently. The well had never rejected lies outright, but this man tested its patience. When he began to laugh, thinking he could mock the village, the wind shifted. Doors opened by themselves. Shadows stretched longer than possible. Leaves rustled in unison. And then the water began to rise. Not violently, but steadily, the surface glinting as though reflecting not the sky, but the hollow hunger in the man's chest. He recoiled, but it was too late. The water whispered his deepest truths, memories he had buried decades ago. Moments of cruelty and deceit flashed before him. Faces appeared in the reflection, accusing, sorrowful, human. He stumbled back, but he could not look away. The village watched quietly. No one intervened. The water, the well, and the presence beneath it were the only judges. By dawn, the man left, weeping, his laughter gone, carrying secrets he would never share. That night, the children dreamed. They saw glimpses of people long gone, faces in the forest, trapped between memory and water, whispering names, warning of unspoken truths. They woke trembling, yet strangely calm, as if part of them had understood something far beyond their age. Years passed, and Kharavadi's forest seemed to breathe more consciously. Travelers began appearing more frequently, drawn by dreams or guilt, each with a burden to lay down. Some were young, some old, some carrying centuries of unresolved family histories. Each approached the well differently, some with fear, some with courage, some with defiance. The village guided them, silently, carefully, while the water waited, patient as ever. A young woman arrived during a particularly harsh winter. She had walked for days, following a dream of a pale figure standing at a well beneath a peepal tree. When she arrived, the ground was frozen, the wind sharp. She hesitated, unsure if she should touch the water, but when she did, it shimmered and revealed faces she had never met yet somehow recognized. Ancestors who had hidden secrets, neighbors long gone, strangers who had wronged her family generations before. She cried, trembling as the water accepted the weight she had brought with her. By the time spring came, the village had grown used to these visitors. Some stayed, some left, but all were marked by Kharavadi in ways invisible to outsiders. And the presence beneath the well, no longer identifiable as a woman, no longer bound to a single form, stretched further, learning from each story, each sorrow, each secret. It was patient, vast, and alive. It did not seek revenge, but it demanded acknowledgement. And then, during a particularly heavy monsoon, something unusual happened. The river that ran just beyond the forest swelled beyond its banks, flooding the outskirts of Kharavadi. Water rushed toward the village, carrying debris, mud, and fallen trees. The villagers panicked, but the well remained calm. The water inside shimmered like mercury, reflecting not the storm outside, but the history of floods and tragedies it had contained for centuries. The young listener stepped forward and touched the surface. Instantly, he felt the presence shift, responding to the chaos. The floodwaters outside slowed unnaturally, redirected by unseen currents, sparing the village entirely. Travelers and villagers alike watched, awestruck and terrified. The presence was no longer just a memory. It was an active force, shaping events, patient yet undeniable. That night, after the storm passed, whispers carried through the village. Not voices exactly, but faint traces of memory, like a current of water running beneath the stones. The children listened and nodded, understanding more than they should. The travelers shivered, feeling watched. The forest seemed to lean closer, the wind waiting, and beneath it all the presence rested again. Patient, vast, eternal, reminding every living soul in Kharavadi that nothing, no matter how carefully buried, could escape notice forever. Centuries passed, and Kharavadi became something the outside world could not touch. Maps forgot it, governments ignored it. Time moved differently there, slowed by the weight of memory, by the rhythm of listening, by the presence that had grown beneath the well. The villagers no longer feared it, they understood. Travelers still came, drawn by dreams, whispers, or guilt, and each left marked, changed, carrying truths they could not speak aloud. The well remained the heart of the village. Its water reflected the sky, yes, but also the countless lives that had brushed against it. Children still leaned over its edge instinctively, whispering secrets too small to be measured, and they were never wrong. Generations of listeners had passed the gift quietly, teaching the rhythm without words. Even the forest seemed alive with attention. Roots pressed against walls, leaves whispered in patterns, and shadows moved just slightly too deliberately. One evening during the longest night of winter, a final traveler arrived. She was neither young nor old, neither curious nor seeking, but drawn by something deeper, a pulse, faint and insistent, that had threaded through generations. She approached the well, her hands trembling. When she touched the water, it shimmered and revealed every story ever whispered, spoken or buried. The original woman who had risen from it, the children who had listened, the travelers who had arrived in storms, floods, or droughts, and the countless forgotten sins and confessions folded carefully into its depths. She did not flinch. She did not cry. She only whispered, "I see it all." The water responded. The presence beneath it shifted, stretching wide, patient and calm, touching every corner of the village. It was no longer simply memory, no longer simply listening. It had become something eternal, a living archive of human truth, a force both protective and relentless. For a moment, the traveler saw it in full, not as a woman, not as a ghost, but as an awareness as vast as time itself. And then she understood. The village, the forest, the well, the water, and the presence beneath it were one. They were the accumulation of centuries of attention, of patience, of witnessing what the world tried to forget. They were the enduring reminder that truth once recognized cannot be buried forever. The traveler knelt and placed her palm flat against the water. The ripple spread across the well, calm and endless. Faces appeared, ancestors, strangers, children long grown, the first woman who had risen from its depths. They were not threatening. They were patient. They were waiting for acknowledgement, for remembrance, for the world to listen. When she rose, the village was still. The wind had stilled. The forest paused. The well reflected the moon, perfectly calm, but the weight of all it held had shifted slightly. Lighter now, shared. She understood that she would carry it forward, not alone, but as part of the rhythm, part of the patience, part of the listening that never ends. And as dawn broke over Kharavadi, the villagers began their day as always, children fetching water, women tending hearths, men walking paths that curved like memory. The forest watched. The wind waited. The well reflected the sky and everything else, because some presences do not vanish. They endure. They listen. They remember. And Kharavadi and the well and what lay beneath it would endure forever.